Around 450 BC, a man named Nehemiah, an official serving King Artaxerxes I of Persia, asked permission to travel to Judea. The king wrote him a letter addressed to the governors beyond the river, guaranteeing his safe passage. That letter is one of the oldest passports on record. Rome issued travel permits to its officials. Ancient India's Arthashastra describes passes issued to enter and leave the country. Han Dynasty China issued documents recording a traveler's height and weight, so a guard at a checkpoint could match the paper to the face. The point is simple. For most of human history, moving from one place to another was not a right. It was a permission slip, signed by whoever owned you. Here's a fun one, the word itself. Louis XIV of France personally signed travel documents he called a passeport, literally, to pass through a port. Back when travel mostly meant ships. There's a competing theory too, that it comes from the medieval port, the gate in a city wall you needed papers to get through. Either way, a king's signature turning into a bureaucratic noun that outlives every king who ever signed it. Just paperwork. The first real law around this comes from England. Henry V formalized the whole practice with the Safe Conducts Act of 1414. Violate a royal safe conduct, and it wasn't a fine, it was treason, punishable by losing your land and everything you owned. Shakespeare even puts the word in Henry's mouth right before Agincourt. And then here's the part that should stop you. Europe basically let the whole idea die. By the 1800s, passports were treated like a medieval relic. Officials thought the concept was embarrassing, old-fashioned, something you'd read about in a history book. You could cross most of the continent on nothing but nerve. So how did the freest travel century in human history end? A war. And a form somebody promised to tear up later. It was only supposed to be temporary. The modern passport has two origin stories. One is an institution, the other is a man. Start with the institution, the room that tried to kill the passport and accidentally made it immortal. In 1920, the League of Nations held the first international passport conference in Paris. Their stated goal wasn't to build a permanent global system. It was the opposite, to restore the pre-war freedom of movement that had just been lost. They wanted the passport gone. But for the time being, they agreed they'd standardize it, just until it wasn't needed anymore. That 1920 conference agreed, for the first time in history, on a common format for every passport issued by a league member: the booklet, the page layout, the photograph. Later conferences in 1924 and 1926 kept repeating the same promise. Passports should be abolished as soon as possible. It never happened. The delegates who met to bury the passport gave it a standardized permanent body instead. Now the human side, and this is the part with a real struggle in it. His name was Fridtjof Nansen, a Norwegian zoologist who became a polar explorer. In 1888, he was the first person to cross the Greenland ice cap. In 1893, he did something genuinely insane. He deliberately froze his own ship, the Fram, into the Arctic pack ice and let it drift for almost 3 years, hoping the current would carry him toward the North Pole. This is a man who conquered the most hostile geography on the planet. Then, after the First World War, the League handed him an impossible problem. What do you do with the millions of people left stateless by the collapse of the Romanov, Habsburg, and Ottoman empires? Here's his struggle. The greatest explorer alive, and the one border he couldn't cross was a bureaucratic one. Most of these refugees had no proof of identity, no proof of nationality, nothing. Without papers, they couldn't go anywhere. Not to safety, not to work, not home, because for a lot of them, home didn't exist as a country anymore. The breaking point came in 1921, when the new Soviet government stripped citizenship from every Russian living abroad. Hundreds of thousands of people went to bed as citizens of a country and woke up belonging to nowhere on earth. Nansen's answer was a single sheet of paper. The Nansen passport, first issued in 1922 for stateless refugees. The man who had nothing left to prove invented the one document that let people who legally did not exist prove they were alive. Around 450,000 people received one. Those who could afford it paid 5 gold francs for their own existence. More than 50 countries eventually recognized it. And in 1922, Nansen won the Nobel Peace Prize. But here's the part everyone misses. The passport was never really about travel. Sit with this for a second. A passport is not yours. It's the property of the government that issued it. You're not the owner, you're the bearer. You don't buy it, you pay a fee to use it. That's the tell. Whoever owns the document owns the decision of who you're allowed to be. Remember the Soviets stripping citizenship from Russians abroad back in 1921? That's the callback. A country can unperson you with a signature. No trial, no paper trail except the one they just destroyed. And turned inward, on a country's own people, the same idea becomes a cage. The Soviet Union used internal passports, the Propiska system, to control and monitor exactly where a citizen was allowed to live. You didn't just carry a passport to leave the country, you needed one to move across town. Then there's the darkest version of this idea, and I'm going to say it flat, no embellishment because it doesn't need any. Apartheid South Africa ran an internal passport system called the Dompas, literally, stupid pass. Every black South African over the age of 16 had to carry a reference book at all times. Fingerprints, photograph, racial classification, employer's name. The system existed to segregate the population, restrict movement, and control where people were allowed to work. Between 1919 and 1986, this system produced over 17 million arrests. It's part of what sparked the Sharpeville massacre in 1960. A passport can carry you across the entire world, or it can trap you 3 streets from your own house. Same piece of paper. If you've made it this far, you already get what this channel is. So quick favor, no big pitch hit subscribe. History Rewired is where we take one small, boring-looking thing and follow the wire all the way out to whatever it's secretly connected to. New one every week. Okay, back to it. And once a document can decide who you are, someone is always going to put a price on it. Nansen's passport cost 5 gold francs. Even a refugee's own identity came with a fee attached. Now fast forward to today and look at the Henley Passport Index. It ranks every passport on Earth by how many countries you can enter without asking permission first. The gap between the top and the bottom isn't small. It's obscene. A Singaporean passport holder can reach 169 more destinations visa-free than someone holding an Afghan passport, the largest mobility gap the index has ever recorded. Henley's own chairman has a name for it: the birthright lottery. And if you don't like the number your birth gave you, there's a market for that too. Citizenship by investment programs let people fast-track a second passport for a significant payment. Money literally buys you a better nationality. Here's the reversal beat, and it's a good one. The UK passport sat at rank 1, the best in the world, as recently as 2015. Then Brexit happened, and it slid down the rankings within a few years. Proof that the value of the booklet in your drawer can crash overnight, exactly like a currency. For most people alive right now, their passport is the single largest asset they will ever hold. And they got it for free, or by accident of birth, or they never got a good one at all. The passport didn't just sort us into countries, it changed what identity even means. Remember that 1914 photo requirement from the Cold Open? The writer Paul Fussell called it the source of a new kind of anxiety, an anxious self-awareness. The frozen face. The U-15 that keeps following you around for a decade because nobody renewed the photo on time. And here's a rule of 3 worth sitting with some of the Nansen passport holders. The legally stateless, the people the map had erased, were named Nabokov, Stravinsky, and Pavlova. Add Marc Chagall to that list. Some of the 20th century's greatest art came out of people who, on paper, weren't from anywhere. There's a mourning note buried in this too. Writers like Stefan Zweig watched the borderless world of their childhood disappear in a single generation. and some of them never got over it, the sense that the world they were promised had simply been taken back. Before 1914, you were a person. After 1914, you were a nationality, a number, and a face that had to match a photo, which means the borders you feel today are younger than your great-grandparents. Before 1914, you could cross most of Europe on nerve alone. After 1914, the map grew teeth. The Romanov Empire, the Habsburg Empire, the Ottoman Empire, the empires was gone, all three of them within a few years of each other, and every new line drawn on the map turned millions of people into foreigners or into nobody overnight. Here's where the loop reopens. Europe spent the back half of the century quietly, slowly, abolishing the very borders it had just invented. The Schengen area is, in a strange way, the closest thing the world has gotten to the exact dream that 1920 Paris Conference said it wanted a return to freedom of movement. Borders, as we actually live inside them today, are not ancient. They're barely 100 years old, drawn mostly by paperwork, and it's still tightening right now in your pocket. The biometric passport is already here. Chips, fingerprints, facial recognition, all folded into the same little booklet. China began issuing e-passports back in 2011. A booklet, a chip, a face. Which means the quiet daily reality is this. The accident of which booklet you happen to be handed at birth silently decides where you can go, where you can work, where you can build a life, and who you're even allowed to build it with. Which brings the whole thing back to the summer of 1914. A form, a photo, a stamp. Something a few tired governments promised to tear up the moment the war ended. They didn't tear it up, and somewhere tonight a person is standing in a line, holding a small book that will decide the entire shape of their life, where they can go, what they can become, whether they get to stay.